All right, perfect. We are recording. So, again, welcome everyone to Professionalism in Practice and on February 2nd. And I am Christina, but again, we will do our introductions on the next slide here. And everybody can see the screen okay still, right?
Yep.
All right, perfect. So, yes, so again, I'm Christina. If we haven't met already, I'm the coordinator for internships and career programming for Rockefeller College. And a lot of my students are here for the our assignment, but also to as they're starting their internship. So it's great to see you all. And Jessica, I will pass it off to you.
Sure. Hello, I'm Jessica Puglisi. I work in the Career and Professional Development Office. I am the Assistant Director for Employer Relations, and help students try to connect them to employers through career fairs, meeting one-on-one, etc. So happy to have you here. And I will pass it off to Demira.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tamira Khan. I work in the Massey School of Business, and I'm the academic coordinator for digital forensics. So actually, I help with sharing resources and training and jobs, and other certification related things, to help with digital forensics and information security. And I also run the internship class as well. And I'm going to pass it over to Vincia. Philip.
Hello, everyone. I'm Vincia Phillip. I'm the Assistant Director of Career Education in the Office of Career and Professional Development. I work with Jessica. And most of my work is really just working one-on-one with students to help prepare them for internships, the world of work, grad school, whatever it is. So I'm just really happy that you're here and to just cover this topic. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all. No, we're really looking forward to this today. Again, thank you all for being here. So I'm just gonna go through our agenda really quickly. We just introduced ourselves, so we got that done. And then Jessica is gonna go over what is professionalism and why is it important, and professional communication. And I will be covering the strong work ethic and categories that fit into that. And Demira will be covering adaptability and learning, and Vincia will be doing interpersonal skills and workplace culture. And throughout the presentation, feel free to put questions in the chat, but we'll also have time at the end to answer questions and have more of a discussion as well. So, with that being said, I will pass it over to you, Jessica. And as you're going, feel free to let me know when you're done with your slides if I'm not getting your subtle hint.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so what is professionalism, which is the topic we're talking about here? Rather than sort of recreate my own definition, I basically took from NACE, which is the National Association for Colleges and Employers, which is essentially our benchmark, right? Who we look to on a national level for this kind of work. So this is it, really knowing your environment, understanding it, demonstrating work habits that impact a larger group and make a difference. So these are some behaviors. I won't go through it all, but I just wanted to sort of give you a framework on what it is. The other thing I just want to plug is our office offers something called the Focus 2. It's an assessment. So if you're wondering like, oh, what am I thinking about for majors or careers and things like that, it helps with that. But it also will gauge where you land in some of the categories, including professionalism that NACE is looking for, that actually employers are looking for. So next slide. So communication, right? So what you write, speak, how you listen, all really affects the way you work and how you engage with who you work with. So that's the first topic that we're going to cover. Next slide. So one thing I will say is before you really can showcase your skills, employers notice communication. And that could be saying you're going to show up at a certain time and doing it, communicating the things you're working on a project. It builds trust, it builds credibility, and it builds your reputation. And then obviously that translates to the company's trust, credibility, and reputation because you're really representing them. So on the flip side, poor communication can sometimes mean you're missing an opportunity. Maybe there's a project you really want to work on or a department and an internship you really want to work on. But if you don't bring that up and communicate that, the other person will never know. So that could be a missed opportunity, can cause a lot of confusion. You think you're saying what you mean, but it's not being received that way, could cause confusion. And really the worst case scenario is it could cause conflict. So this is why it's important and why we want to work on these skills so that those things don't happen. Next slide. So different tools may have different expectations, but you always want to keep them professional. So they're sort of going in somewhat like formal to informal, except for the video meetings. So emails I would keep very formal. And I would use, full sentences, things like that. Have a greeting, have a subject line. Phone calls, same thing. Keep it professional. Voicemail too. Make sure your voicemail is set up to receive voicemail, especially if you're applying for internships or you're applying for full-time roles. If someone is calling to offer an interview, you want to make sure your voicemail is set up so you can receive that opportunity. If you've used Slack or Teams for other roles and positions you may have had, how does that communication look? Texting. I know our office, sometimes we have a group text. Sometimes we're texting one-on-one with each other. How does that look? And then video meetings. This is a hybrid world with technology. So even if you don't have a hybrid role, sometimes video meetings come into play. So what does that look like? And so we'll dive a little bit deeper into each tool. Next slide. So I sort of touched on this, but what does a professional email look like, right? What we like to see is a clear subject line, a proper greeting. Hello, doctor, hello, name, hello, maybe even Mr. last name. Make sure the message is concise. It's tough when you're busy and someone emails you a bunch of things and it's paragraphs and it's hard to really work through and you're like, what are we getting at? So keep it concise and like sort of highlight what you're looking for if I need follow-up or if you're looking for something from me. And then a professional signature, regards, etc., and your name. The things you would like to avoid is, hey, I didn't hear back. No context. Hey is sort of more familiar, maybe something you would do with a friend, maybe not something you would do with a supervisor or a coworker. Just following up with no context, no subject line, and then messaging off hours. Because then there's the idea of either the time management skills aren't working there or the expectation for someone to be messaging you at that same time. So those are the things we like to see and the things we like to see avoided. Next slide. So here's an example, an email sent. I want you to read it and I want you to, in the chat, or you can come off of mute, tell me what you think you would have this person, in this case it's me, what you would have me work on.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you well, yes.
We can hear you, Sim.
Hi. So the first thing I would have you work on is your hey. Like, yeah, we ain't gonna do that. We can't.
Okay.
We can't start with hey. I would probably start with dear, whatever their last name is, or greetings to just be a little bit more formal and polite. In regards to the so, I just saw the email, like in regards to your grammar, right? I would be very careful with that. I would use more, be more grammatically correct. One of the things that I'm encouraging students to do is that if they have something like this that they're putting together, one, they can look up exemplars, right? Which I'm sure that your office provides. And I always tell students if they are going, and I would love to hear your response to this. I always tell students if they are going to use any type of virtual support, Virtual support should be exactly what I just mentioned. Support. It should not be framing things for them or their starting point. It should be supporting whatever they're putting together, but they should make sure that it's authentic. And last but not least, the reason that they want to make sure that it is authentic is because many employers today are scanning to see if this is an authentic voice or if it's some type of just virtual reality created correspondence. I'm off my
Mm.
soapbox.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
And I can say, to speak on behalf of Sim, that Sim always starts his emails with greetings. So he
Okay.
practices what he preaches.
We love someone who stays on brand. Yeah, you can't go wrong with greetings at all. Yeah,
There
and
were
so, yeah,
no, go ahead. I was going to read a couple from the chat too.
please.
So it looks like also, and I apologize if I mispronounce anyone's name as well, grammar, great.
Hmm.
Not including Halima says making sure to include a subject and send during business
Thank you.
hours.
Yes. Yep.
And also Lena or Lena, I apologize, says seems like a text, not professional wording.
Yeah, I say LOL. I'm not capitalizing. I'm saying TBH. I'm saying anyway, let me know what you want to do. Like that's very casual and not professional. Even my name isn't capitalized. Like, I like that you caught no subject. I love Demira's tip, right? Like you might be used to being up at a certain time and that's okay, but yeah, schedule the email so that it's during work hours. That's a great tip. Is there anything I did not see or cover that's in the chat before we
I
move on?
think it looks like, let's see. So Will says, the guy you're sending this to ain't your friend, so stop talking to him like that. Yep, absolutely
Oh,
right, Will. And Dagina says the sign off could be better, including full name. And
oh, Sim, it's
oh my
okay.
gosh,
TBA.
I'm
To
laughing.
be honest, that's okay. It's all right. Well, either way, we shouldn't assume that anyone knows what that is. It's not professional, it's jargon. So if you want to stay safe, then just use words. So,
Agreed.
okay, cool. All right. That's just basically putting the email slide in practice. So beautiful. All right, next slide.
All
Now we're
right.
going to talk more about phone and voicemail. What I mean when I put that phone example, and I apologize, it's overlapping, is I'm applying for jobs. I know jobs may be calling me, especially if I don't know the number, it's not saved in mine, and I'm applying, and maybe they're inviting me for an interview. If I don't know the number and I know I've been actively applying and hoping for interviews, I will answer my phone. Hello, this is Jessica. Something to that effect instead of like, yeah, what do you want? So I think all of these things seem like small things, but could be helpful for you to know and already makes an impression before you even step foot in an interview, let alone the internship or the job. Also setting up your voicemail. So it could be just what I like Apple gives me. Mine is sort of robotic, or you can set it up. Just make sure that it's professional. And if you're leaving a voicemail, make sure because we get voicemails on our career office phone inbox, and many times I don't get a name, I don't get a phone number, and I don't get any context about why someone is calling. What am I supposed to do with that voicemail? So if you can leave your name, a clear number, and the context of why you're calling, that would be super helpful. Okay, next slide. Many teams are using some sort of messaging format, whether it's Teams or Slacks. So similarly, I would say your communication, it might not be as formal as an email, but it would not be like a text message to my friend either. The other thing that I don't like is someone just messaging me, hey, like, can I help you? Do you need something? So context is really good there. Greet before jumping into the ask. Be concise, still use full sentences, and just be respectful of their time and response time. And that same thing could be said for an email, especially if you're working on a project together, so you're on the same page. When do you prefer this? Or when do you want to meet to discuss this? Those kinds of things. Okay, next slide. The last thing is texting. So, we work with students in our office. Sometimes they're running late, and we really appreciate a text, a message on Teams, an email, so that we know. Again, that helps with your credibility. Because if you're just running late and we don't know about it, and maybe you are supposed to meet with another student to go over their resume, that affects our whole entire office. So just letting someone be aware, even through a text, that you're running late or whatever you need to communicate is really appreciated because it affects the entire office. When you are texting, though, you want to avoid emojis, slang, the TBH, inappropriate times. So there's a theme here. The other thing, we talk about communication, all the ways you can communicate in all the channels, but communication is also about active listening. So not necessarily for this, but if you do have a meeting that is on Zoom or Teams, make sure your camera is on and that you're listening, that you're engaging, that you're making eye contact, that you're not interrupting, that if you don't get something, you're asking clarification questions. The tough thing is feeling like you don't know something, but I want to say, if you're new for an internship or new for a job, the expectation is you don't know. You know very little, actually, and that's okay. So ask clarifying questions. It helps in the long run. Sometimes summarizing key points, if you have a meeting, okay, this is what it sounds like the priorities are. Am I getting that right? That can be helpful. And then obviously taking notes. Okay, the next slide, please. Follow-up. So follow-up communication is also important, right? When do you follow up? After an interview, that could be a thank you note. Thank you for having me for this interview. And we like to see that about 48 hours after the interview. Maybe after a meeting, especially if you don't understand a part of your project or something that you're working on. When you're assigned a task, again, it could be clarification questions. If you're waiting for a response, so I'm working on a project and by Friday, we were supposed to have gotten to a certain point and we're still not there. I might follow up with that team member to say, oh, where are you at? Do you need help sort of getting to our deadline? And then for clarity. Follow-up communication like this shows you care, you're invested, and that you are also reliable. Okay, next slide. If you have a remote role or a hybrid role, I think communication becomes even more important because you don't have that face-to-face contact. So you almost want to over-communicate your progress, what you're working on. Meetings with your supervisor or your other teammates are going to be key. Being responsive during work hours will be important. Clarifying these deadlines and priorities. You're just missing all of the visual cues you normally get in a in-office experience. So regular check-ins with whomever you're reporting to is going to be key. So my final takeaways with professional communication. To communicate professionally, you need clarity, you need respect, boundaries of time, people's space, and consistency. And this helps build your reputation, strengthen your relationships, and it can open doors to other opportunities. Like I said, you want to take on a certain project that you might not be working on, but it will help you with your professional development. That could lead to something just because you opened your mouth and said, hey, I'm interested and curious about this thing. So an open mouth, a closed mouth doesn't get fed. So that's how I feel. But if you keep at this professional communication, I think it can really take you to the next level in your professional development. So I will end there unless there's any questions, or we can wait until the end.
This is Sim. I have what I'm going to refer to as the provocative question, but I think that you
Love
can
it.
beat. So here's my provocative question. In today's climate, as we all know, people bring their backpacks to work, their backpacks being their positionality, their bias, etc. So as we're having this conversation or this correspondence right now about professionalism in the workplace, how do individuals balance professional expectations versus the need to feel that they have to assimilate? I'm thinking about this when it comes to different cultures that may show up in the workplace. I'm thinking about, I'll use myself as the guinea pig relevant to generational differences, such as me having to look up TBH, stuff like that. So if you can really just share some information in regards to, I'm now showing up to the workplace as an intern, right? And now I feel that, well, I want to be I'm trying to balance being my authentic self versus now being expected to acclimate it to a different culture. Do you have any feedback on that, Jessica?
Yes, but I'm going to pause because I think we do cover this a little bit further into our presentation. So can we just put like a pin in your question
Yes, please.
and we'll get through the presentation? But if you don't feel like it was covered in the way you were hoping, we can definitely have an open dialogue at the end.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Sim. Thank you, Jessica. So that was great. So I will move on to strong work ethic. So as I said earlier, kind of broke this up into a variety of categories of what makes someone have a strong work, who has a strong work ethic stand out from someone who does not. And of course, there are other categories besides the ones I mentioned, but these are just the ones that I chose to focus on just for all of your reference. So, punctuality is the first one that I chose to focus on. So, something to note with punctuality, which is just in basic terms, being on time. So, being on time for your internship, being on time for your job, etc. Is that it's about more than just the clock and keeping track of time. So it's about showing accountability, mutual respect for your employer, for your colleagues, the people you work with, and it's a mutual trust as well that when you say you're going to be somewhere at the time you're supposed to be, you're there, you're reliable. And this is something that stands out from day one. So even to bring it into like interviewing, for example, wanting to make a good impression from the start, showing up early to an interview shows that not only, of course, that is just a general interviewing tip, but it's something that's already kind of kick-starting how you're going to show up at your internship and your job, that you're going to respect their time. And again, it's further showing professionalism as part of this topic, of course, as well. And it's also showing that you're taking your work seriously, that you have a demonstrated commitment to your work and the people that you work with. It's showing good time management, preparation, and again, commitment. And it's also kind of going off of that point of that when you're interviewing, this is something that you're already showing up early and then as you're working, showing up on time or early is showing that like managers and people in leadership positions are taking note of this. It's something that, again, shows further commitment and self-discipline and overall professionalism, and something that people in leadership roles will keep in mind as you continue to grow in your role. And it's also just, again, showing that you understand that your role affects other people besides yourself and sets the tone overall. So, accountability is being accountable, taking accountability of your actions is really showing that it's okay that you made a mistake, or of course, not that you're trying to make a mistake, but if you do, you're owning it and you're fixing it and doing what you can to make up for the mistake rather than saying like the opposite of being accountable for your actions, of course, is saying, oh no, that wasn't me, it's not my fault. You don't want to be that person. Being accountable is extremely important to show a strong work ethic, even if something you think is not the end of the world. It's a small thing, still showing that you are responsible for your own actions and the results and who that affects is really important in being a professional. And it's also reflecting, again, because these topics are related, how seriously you take your role and your work. And again, being dependable and committed is seen through accountability and making sure that that's a key aspect of your personal work ethic. And it's also just showing again that you're showing and demonstrating your best work consistently. So if you do submit something for work or you're working on a project and something goes wrong, that you want your best work to be shown. So if it's not, you are doing what needs to be done in order to correct the work, or again, which we'll go into when Demira talks as well, like asking questions and being open to learning opportunities. So I won't get into that too much, but this does drive being accountable, drives growth, and it drives learning, and it shows professional maturity. And again, self-discipline, honesty, respect for expectations of your organization and companies. And these, again, are qualities that show a great leader and somebody that is going to continue to grow at their organization. And it also strengthens collaboration and team morale in general. If everybody is willing to be accountable for what they do, wanting to contribute to the team, and also just having your team's best interests in mind rather than just trying to, for example, blame someone else for something that went wrong. Being accountable, even if, as I said before, it's not the end of the world, shows more than you would think and really shows strong, just moral and professional skills. So taking initiative. So this is really the most apparent category of having a strong work ethic. So taking initiative is asking when you've done your work, you've completed your assigned assignments that you've been giving, is there more that I can do? Even just going above expectations, exceeding expectations, doing more than what is being asked of you really shows a desire to learn and to grow, and that you're again committed to your work and to the success of your team. And not just, okay, you did your work, you're done. Does somebody else need help? Is there a project that needs more work or time being spent into it? And it's again just showing personal self-discipline, responsibility, and taking initiative and taking on more also will build confidence too. So as you gain more experience and take on more projects and assignments, you'll feel more confident in your role, whether it's an internship or a job, because you're getting more accustomed and acclimated to your role. So it also is just showing that, again, you're engaged, you're interested in what you're doing, and invested overall beyond the bare minimum. It also demonstrates less of a need for your supervisor or manager to be micromanaging or really making sure you're doing what you need to be doing. If you've demonstrated that you're a diligent worker, that when you're done, you ask what more needs to be done. And also just shows that, again, you're willing to do the work and you want to continue to grow. And it also does demonstrate adaptability, but again, Demira is going to go into that more, so I won't cover that. And it turns effort into impact. So you're showing that you're actively contributing to the organization that you're working for. And attention to detail. So it's similar again, as I said, some of these do sound repetitive just because they are all like very related, but it is important to talk about them separately just because, again, these are all separate pieces of what creates a strong work ethic. So attention to detail and just completing your work assignments thoroughly and ensuring follow-up communication is really important. So as needed for an assignment. So it's also just showing that, kind of going back to initiative too, is that there's not as much of a need for micromanagement or someone to be looking over your shoulder and making sure you're doing what you need to be doing. And it's also showing that with attention to detail, there's going to be less of a chance for big mistakes to happen. And again, of course, mistakes happen. We're all human, but paying attention and completing your work thoroughly, there will be less of a chance that mistakes will happen that could cause bigger issues down the line. And accuracy is key. So again, like taking the time to double check your work, reread, take notes when your supervisor is talking, to make sure that when you're completing an assignment, it really is done to the best of your ability and that you're not forgetting small details that could really make a difference. And it again, it really just focuses on not just completing the work, but doing a really great job in your work, which stands out in all of these areas and contributes to strong work ethic in general, supporting learning and growth and respect for the company's expectations and standards. And another thing to also just emphasize with attention to detail is quality over quantity. So that can be sometimes difficult, especially in a fast-moving work environment. But keeping in mind these other strong characteristics and categories and aspects of a stronger work ethic, including time management, which I'm going to talk about next, is important so that you're able to complete your projects with a strong attention to detail and do, again, once you're done, you take the initiative to take more on, but also not just rushing through your work. It's about striking a balance, and that's part of learning, which Demira will cover, but it's something to keep in mind that attention to detail does matter. So I kind of touched on this a little bit, but time management is, of course, the cornerstone of a strong work ethic. So, as Jessica was talking about professional communication and the importance in, when you're sending an email, and Demira mentioned this as well, schedule sending for 9 o'clock a.m. the next morning rather than sending an email at 2 o'clock a.m. is showing that you have strong time management skills, that you're working within the standard hours of operation that have been agreed upon. And even though in today's climate, you may have a remote internship or hybrid or in person, and it might be a variation of the three, it's still something that if you've discussed with your supervisor that you are going to be doing your work in a certain amount of time, that you should be doing it during that time. It ensures, again, self-discipline, but also mutual respect for the people that you're working with and for. And it's also just working when others are working too. Likely your supervisor is not going to be working at 2 o'clock a.m. So really makes sense for you to be working during the times that you should be working again. And time management also will help just avoiding procrastination and giving yourself enough time to do quality work. So as I mentioned before, with attention to detail, quality over quantity. But if you have developed a way to effectively manage your time, which again takes practice and time, of course, but working on this skill and remembering how important this is will help you to be intentional with your work and more productive so that when you're finished, you can take initiative to take on more assignments, but it aligns your effort with results. And that is why, again, time management kind of goes with the rest of these categories. So that is all I have for strong work ethics. So before we move on to Demira, does anybody have any questions about that? And we can always wait till the end as well. So I don't see any. So Demira, I will hand it over to you.
Hello, everybody. I have my email address if in case you want to contact me. I'm going to cover adaptability and learning, and thank you for Jessica and Christina for giving the teasers about the topic. Actually, we oftentimes judge ourselves based on whether we get like first or second or third place or like the top in the class. And there's the notion of not doing that and rather valuing ourselves and our identity by the fact that we are learning versus what the final result is. And I want to bring a story about my daughter who is very good in that she is a lifelong learner. And when she was like 1 year old or something, she wanted to climb the monkey bars, right? And she couldn't because you're 1 years old, you haven't developed your muscle, right? But she kept on trying. And I think in like first grade or kindergarten, she had in her goal for the year, I want to be able to climb through the whole monkey bars. And as time went on from like 1 to that age, she kept on trying and trying and going further and further and lasting longer. And that is to show you that if you don't succeed and if you fail, that is not necessarily a negative thing, a one-stop thing. It's that you're building strength. In an IT sense, which is from my background, if you have a problem and you're troubleshooting it, if you get an error, you can use that error to figure out, oh, well, I tried this, then these are the next steps. And so it's not that failure is a be all end all thing, and it can actually help you going forward. And that's what I want to talk about, a growth mindset. And if we can go to the next slide. So we live in a world where things are changing constantly, right? There may be different disciplines which change less, like math, but we are in a world that is constantly changing the tools and the techniques, like AI. AI was not usable from like a student or a employer perspective until fairly recently. And so there may be people who are seniors in the field who are learning AI at the same time that you are. So nobody knows everything. And that's really important to tell yourself and know and be comfortable with. You may not know everything. Your bosses don't know everything. Your colleagues don't know everything. And that's okay. Um, and it is good to know that you can learn. You can change that part of yourself. You can build those skills in. So it doesn't matter if you don't have all of the skills now. So think and tell to yourself that you can do this, right? It's all about your self-talk too. If somebody asks you, have you ever done this before? You'll get this in your interviews actually before you're even hired. They'll be like, have you done this? You could say, no, I haven't, and I don't have experience. Or you could be, well, I don't have experience with this specifically, but I have a parallel experience or something that you have. Or I think I could learn it if you gave me a couple of weeks. And so think about how you are expressing yourself and talking to yourself about when you experience a problem. When you experience problems, there's also different ways to go about it, right? We can say, oh my gosh, there's an issue, and report it. And that's okay, but it's better to think things through and be like, okay, I had an issue where I'm getting a problem accessing the system. What I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see if there's a known maintenance situation going on, or if not, then I'm going to contact our IT staff and report it so that they can figure it out. So, are you just reporting a fire, or are you carrying water over and helping put it out, essentially? Another thing is that we say that nobody knows everything, but it's also true that when you come from the classroom environment and you go into the office, you shouldn't expect to know everything based on your classroom experience. You need to adapt what you're learning in the classroom, and these can be different topics which are taught more theoretically sometimes, even if you do hands-on activities that won't necessarily translate exactly into your specific workplace environment. And so keep that in mind that that's okay as well. I'm going to get more into detail and seeking out mentors and resources and being willing to ask questions. Those are ways that you can bridge that gap between what you know and what you don't know yet. So if we can go to the next slide. When you first start on a job, there's a lot that you have no idea about. And Vinci is going to go a little bit more into this in terms of workplace culture because every different job and company is different. The departments that you're in could be different, right? Because people are different. We all act differently. There can be different expectations from your supervisors. And so when you get into the job, you have a ton of resources around you. And there are lots of questions that you can ask to get you a step ahead. That you don't want to be figuring out from scratch. You can build upon what other people know, and it can sort of get you there a lot faster. So one of the things that you can recommend, you can ask is like, so what's one thing you wish you knew when you first started this job? Right? So you can say like, if you could go back in time, what would you wish you had known at a time? Another thing is that you can ask about specific tools or skills that can be learned. Before you even start the internship, one thing you can ask is, oh, are there things that I could look up ahead of time? If you're going into the next semester, are there classes that maybe I should take to prepare for this internship or this job? You can ask about internal training or resources that might be available, or documentation. You can ask about what key people in the office you should get to know so that they might be able to provide you with more resources or more advice. And then another thing also that you can ask for is, how is your personal performance? So you can gauge how well you think you're doing because sometimes you're not realistic in how you're judging yourself. You might be more harsh on yourself than other people are. And then also you can ask about retroactively, right? These people have experience in this company. What is a specific soft skill that you wish that you knew? So we now would call them as professional skills, which are things like communication, um, public speaking, for example, which is I think voted people, if they could choose, right? They'd rather be buried alive versus public speaking. And people oftentimes feel really vulnerable about that point about themselves. So, also taking consideration that. I would also say, too, another thing that I recommend is reaching out to find mentors when you get into the workplace because it gives you somebody else who has some understanding about the office that you're in the department maybe, and they can provide you with maybe more unbiased feedback than your supervisors or your team because they are outside looking in and they know the processes in place for specific situations. And it can be sort of like a good ear to give you advice. Other questions that you should be asking, as Jessica discussed as well, is that you should ask for clarification. So I have experienced all these different scenarios, either through myself or from my students. And the first scenario is where you get a assignment that isn't very clear. So the supervisor is basically asking for their employee to look at the competitor's social media and give a report. And it could be a lot of things, right? It could be something about what content are they posting. It could be about how often they post. It could also be like, what are they really asking for? What's a brief report for that supervisor? Is it just like 3 sentences? Is it a PowerPoint slide? And you won't know unless you ask. You can assume a lot of things, but that might not be accurate. And you don't want to waste your time or your supervisor's time. Another thing I recommend in this type of situation too is to look into best practices. So look online and say like, oh, comparison of social media. What are metrics for determining success of social media? And then you can also add value to the question that you're asking rather than saying like, hey, what about content types or posting? So you can see maybe there is actually a lot of different things that you could cover, and then you could ask that specifically. The second scenario is about priorities, because sometimes there's a lot of things that are going on, right? And your supervisor is getting things from multiple different places, and they may have forgotten that they assigned you with another assignment due at the same time. And so it's impossible for you to clone yourself. And you only have so much time in the day, right, that you're working. And you need to be able to say, this is not feasible. And you don't need to say no, but you could say, like, hey, yeah, I could totally do that. But you also gave me this other assignment and it's due at the same time. What should I prioritize first? Then, if we look at this next scenario, we have a supervisor giving a project, but they don't mention when they need it. And so every time somebody sends me an email or asks me to do something, I have had several situations where I've been gotten something and said, "Give me this data by a certain time." Or they won't say the time though. They'll say, "Give me this data." And then I will follow up and say, I've seen your request. I could definitely do this, but when would you like it? And this is similar to the ask that you're saying. And it could be that it's due this afternoon, or it could be that, oh, you can do it when you find the time. The next scenario is about jargon, which we've sort of brought up before with the TBH. And if you're in different industries or just based on, differences in generation, you might be used to using specific acronyms or terms. And it's okay for you not to understand these terms. Don't just pretend to understand. And even if you look something up, you could think that it's the right acronym and it may not be because that specific context that acronym means something else. So it's definitely okay to clarify and say, hey, there were some specific terms that I wasn't sure that I was interpreting correctly. I'm still getting up to speed on my internal terminology. Could you quickly clarify what this means? I want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. And then we have the last two scenarios that I wanted to cover, which are pretty common as well. Um, if you're unsure about how much effort to put in, and this sort of aligns with that first scenario as well. So somebody says, look into something. And look into something could be a very short, brief executive summary, or paragraph, or it could mean a complete presentation. And rather than investing a lot of time into 8 hours of a presentation, clarify. Say, I've started this, I could go really deep into this, but would you prefer a brief bulleted list or a more formal document? And they can let you know. And then the last scenario that I'd like to cover is about missing things that you need. You will sometimes be asked to do something where you don't have all the necessary components, the access, the software, the hardware to be able to accomplish. And you might just be in a holding pattern until you get those things, rather than just wait and assume that people know that you need information or need something. It's better to just reach out and say, I'm ready to do this, but I noticed I don't have access to these things. And is that something that you can do for me? Even if it's not necessarily something that you need access for, if you notice that you can do a job better, if you had access to a alternative form of information, for example. So I had a student one time working with me. I'd given them admissions data to review and to provide statistics for. The report from admissions was in a PDF file. And it turns out when we had our follow-up meeting that they had basically tried to transcribe all of this data and calculate it by hand because they didn't have something that would convert the PDFs into an Excel spreadsheet. And then when I realized that, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I didn't send you the Excel. I could generate that and get it to you so you wouldn't have to waste so much time. So it's okay to ask questions. If you think that there's a better way to do things, I think sometimes your employers are going to be happy about that because they may not have even known or thought about that being a solution. And as we conclude this, I want to ask if there's any questions. You see there's some in the chat that Christina dealt with. What questions should I start with if I'm unsure about what to ask or not sure how to articulate my confusion? So Amelia, can you expand on
Hi.
that maybe?
Oh, sorry. I wasn't sure how to type it out. That's basically what I'm like going for. Sometimes told to do something or I'm listening to a lecture and I'm not sure what I'm like confused about, but I do have questions. Like what are questions that like you start with just to like start a conversation or start to like maybe expand on the topic of going for to not to narrow down exactly what we're trying to ask about. Not really sure how to like articulate it, but like you know how someone is like explaining something to you, but you're not exactly sure what they're saying, but you're not sure how to like ask to say, hey, I'm not really understanding what you're saying. You don't know where you're confused about. Like,
So
how do you tell someone about that?
sometimes what people recommend is if you have a meeting, for example, right, to write what you understand of that meeting and to send it to your supervisor so that you can ensure that you're all on the same page. So you can maybe write what you think you heard. It's sort of active listening process, right? Is like you say, I think that this is what we covered. Or if you have a question about something, you can go, hey, I'm a little bit confused about, or I'm a little bit uncertain about what we discussed in particular. This you do have to narrow down a little bit and give something to the supervisor or the person you're asking the question for, so they have something to go on. Do you have a specific example maybe that we can like pinpoint a little bit further?
I don't mean to cut you
Yeah.
off, Demira. Do you mind, Amelia, if you put that in the chat? I just
Yeah.
want to give Vincia enough time to speak.
I'm gonna let Vincia take over things too because she is an excellent presenter and she is covering interpersonal skills and workplace culture, which we are very excited.
Yeah, Amelia, feel free to put that in the chat. We can also discuss after too. Thank you.
All right, so I'm gonna try to zoom through it because I know that I also want to leave time for any additional questions, but I'm just gonna cover interpersonal skills and workplace culture, and I'm fine going to the next slide. All right, so your interpersonal skills are really your people skills. It's how you're connecting with people, it's how you're communicating, and really the foundation of building positive relationships. So really what we're thinking about are some of the things that really just get you to where you need to get to. So whether that is connecting while you're here in school with an advisor, your professor, whether you're working on a team with your classmates, or your peers, those are all skills that you're using to get things done. And it's very similar in the workplace. And to be honest, and Jessica could comment on this, a lot of times what gets you an internship or a job is really those soft skills, these interpersonal skills. Like employers don't have time to teach those people skills, but they can teach you technical skills. So they can teach you how to use Excel, but it's really hard to teach someone how to get along with other people, right? So this is really what the heart of those interpersonal skills are. And they really help to form first impressions for other people of you. And they really have an impact on like hiring, whether you get the job, whether people want to work with you, all of those things. And eventually, as you start to build your career, it's going to form your professional reputation. So even as I think right now, if I want to work on a project, there are people that come to mind that I know that are going to get it done, right? There are people that I know are going to plan things. So there's certain qualities that you start to associate with people before you even start to work with them. And the same will happen for you as you start to work. And this is something that can happen in that summer internship. People will pick up on those things really quickly. I know that Christina covered like taking initiative. All of those things are things that would typically come up. Great. So I don't know if I have time to do this, but you can do this really quickly before we kind of get into some of the elements that I'm going to cover in the chat. If you could just share a behavior that you think, a behavior that makes someone seem professional, or you could share a behavior that makes someone seem unprofessional. And this could be in the context of school, anyone that you've interacted with on campus, or it could have been in, you know, a part-time job that you have or internship that you've done.
So I think, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Oh, so
I think comes out to eye contact. Eye contact is really big in the industry, and I've been nervous. I'm nervous a lot, but I started making better eye contact with people and firmly shaking their hand and like getting to know people. But like when I talk to them, I definitely make sure to make eye contact.
Great. Yes. And for anyone else, feel free to share it in the chat. Unprofessional, oversharing about personal life. Yeah. Especially dating
Also,
drama. Yeah.
unprofessional is sharing your Instagram. I feel like your Instagram is more for like I share my LinkedIn more than I share my Instagram.
Good. Absolutely. Okay. All right. So just really thinking about there's certain things that you notice. Even in your part-time job, like I mentioned, the person who shows up late, or the person who doesn't show up at all, and now you have to take up the slack for what they need to do. Jessica put professional, getting their piece of their project done. Unprofessional, showing up late with Starbucks. Absolutely.
Unless
So
they
the
bring
things that
something for me.
Definitely. All right. So we'll start with professional dress codes. It is different from role to role and within different industries, particularly in tech. You'll see people a bit more casual, laid back. If you're at a law firm, you may see people dressed up a bit more. If you're in higher ed, for example, with us, it's really a range of like what we want to show up wearing. And a lot of times it's really just about like, if this is your internship placement or your first job, ask, right? Some of it will be observing and seeing what other people are wearing. But if you're nervous to start somewhere and you don't quite know, it is super important to ask. I've had students show up at an event where they were supposed to be dressed up and they weren't dressed, right? So it really depends on the supervisor whether they're going to communicate that you need to dress up. So I typically will say, hey, we're having a career fair. Just know that we're having a career fair, right? And that's the indicator to say, I need to dress up. I shouldn't be in a hoodie, right? And if you need to clarify that, this is your time to be curious and ask all of those questions. There are differences in how you'll show up. You'll hear terms like business professional, so you'll think suit, right? Business casual, you may think I can wear jeans with a dress shirt, and then casual being able to wear shorts and a t-shirt, right? So there are differences in how you can show up for your work. But like I said, it's always important to clarify with your supervisor if you're unsure, so that you're not underdressed. And when in doubt, dress more professionally. I always say it's better to be overdressed than underdressed for any occasion, because you're gonna feel so uncomfortable if you're not dressed appropriately for a formal event, or if you're going to be meeting new people in important positions. You just never know what's going to happen in your day. So I always say, when in doubt, just go more professional. And then avoiding stuff that's distracting or offensive, that is subjective from place to place. But if you're wearing that hoodie that says something offensive, there's profanity or something on there, just knowing who your clients are, who you're working with, those things are super important to pay attention to. So just err on the side of not wearing that thing and saying, I can wear that on the weekend, or I can wear that when I'm with my friends, but always ask. All right, so a little bit about starting professional relationships. I won't dive too much into the nitty-gritty of networking, but when you start your internships, even now on campus, you're starting to build professional relationships and connections. And it's super important to ask questions. We can't stress this enough. That is the way that you're going to learn. That is the way that you're going to learn about what other people are doing in their day-to-day, and gather that information for yourself. And I would just say, be curious. This is your best time to be curious with the people around you. And that's going to help you to kind of share some of the things about you that are going to get you through your career or through that summer job or whatever that looks like. There are going to be opportunities to do this in person and online, and that's something that we help you with. I just want to put that in there. For one of our appointment types, we have a networking appointment type, so you can always talk more about like how to connect with people in person versus online. So that could be you going to a career fair. That's an in-person networking opportunity for you to meet with a recruiter versus talking to someone on LinkedIn, and that could look very different. So there's different guidelines around that in regard to how you're communicating, and that's something that we'll support you with. And the other thing to keep in mind is just think of networking as relationship building, and it is long-term, right? So you definitely want to know how to keep up or maintain those relationships. Not every relationship is worth maintaining as well. So you're going to meet people or talk to people that you're like, I don't know what else to say, because I feel like that's the hardest part, where people are trying to like maintain something that they feel like isn't really going anywhere. So that's something to keep in mind as you go. The other thing I want to mention is as you're starting to like navigate or start thinking about your careers, it takes time to build your reputation. It takes time to build these relationships as well. So just keep that in mind as you're going through about those impressions that you're building with people. to really rely on you for things. So I'm trying to like rush through and cover
Oh,
the
you're
rest. So next
no
slide.
worries, no worries,
Yeah.
Vincia. I don't want you to stress too much, but yes, if students have to leave, we will have this workshop
Okay.
recorded as well. So
Okay.
no pressure, but no, I appreciate it. It's always tough going at the end.
Yeah, and feel free if I'm like missing something to pop in and say that. All right, so the other element that I want to cover is really just working with others, and we may have covered some of these things already, but they really are going to make or break your career, or even with an internship, being asked to return by a supervisor, right? There's some things or behaviors that they're looking for. So punctuality and reliability are super important in respecting other people's time and respecting the time of your team or anyone that you're meeting with. Jessica covered communication, but that's also a huge piece as well, right? Whether you're communicating that you can't make it to a shift, 5 minutes before your shift, right? All of those things are going to determine whether you are a reliable person or someone that people would want to work with. The next thing is really just respecting differences in how people communicate and how people show up. And that I would say is more of a learned behavior. There's going to be, depending on your workplace, trainings on how to be more culturally competent, right? So that could be one way. But the other thing is really just knowing that you're going to deal with a lot of different opinions, you're going to deal with a lot of different personalities, and being able to acknowledge that and clarify and ask those questions when necessary. And one of the most important things I would say, particularly if you're looking at an internship, accepting feedback is huge, right? The way that you take that feedback is really indicative of some of the qualities that you have and whether someone would want to hire you full time or whether someone would even write a recommendation for you, right? So just knowing that feedback is there for growth and really keeping that in the back of your mind when you hear it, because it definitely determines how people work with you moving forward. Okay, so just covered a little bit about teamwork and collaboration as a huge part of your interpersonal skills. Once again, some of it may be a bit of overlap of things that we covered, but just knowing that wherever you're working, even if you are working in a role that feels independent, you're still supporting a larger team or a company and really sharing that responsibility. So clear communication is super important, always clarifying when you're not sure. For some people working on a team, they have different ways that they operate with deadlines, and really just being sure that you are clear of what those deadlines are and what people need. Those are things that help to build your reputation. So it's not just about like, oh, I'm just a good team player. It's really about how you're starting to build the relationships with people around you and how they view you in regard to reliability. And the other thing is handling conflict professionally. That's something that is super important. There are policies around how to do that, that you will most likely learn how to go about it, but just making sure that you're not taking that into your own hands to handle conflict. Particularly if you're an intern in a position where there's another student that you have a conflict with, take it to your supervisor. And the same thing if you're working in that job, take that to your supervisor and follow the proper procedures, because handling that on your own just leads to really just destroying relationships, but also making it a negative place to be in. So these are things that you definitely want to consider as a part of any team that you are working on. All right, so I know that Sim, you brought this up earlier, and I think this is the appropriate place to kind of address that, understanding workplace culture. I would say the best way to understand workplace culture is by having conversations with the people around you. So it could be your supervisor, but it also could be with other employees and people who are there. So a lot of times I've learned about the workplace culture at an organization by reaching out and talking to people. So if you are networking or doing something called an informational interview, where you're talking to a professional that works somewhere, you can ask about what is it like to work there. And there may be things that you value that are super important to you that you want to know, hey, are there affinity groups at your job? How do they support you in your work, right? They're questions that you can ask employees about like what the expectations are and what the norms are to kind of navigate that place. And some of it is also observation. So if you're starting off as an intern, you may notice that like the communication may be a bit more casual between people. There are things that you're going to notice with communication between you and your supervisor. So some of it's observation, but a lot of it is around conversations, being curious, and talking to other employees or your peers. For example, if you're interning with multiple people, just kind of navigating it that way as well. Sim.
Yes, ma'am.
Your original question, do you feel like that was answered, addressed, or was there something else that you wanted to, I guess, kind of flesh out?
No, the first thing I would say is that I definitely appreciate the fact that you talk about observational learning in regards to understanding or getting acclimated to the workplace culture. So I definitely appreciate that. I'm just thinking at times when people are acclimating to a workplace, I have seen over the course of my career the difference between, let me give this some context. I currently serve as a chief diversity officer. The reason I'm saying that is that I think sometimes in a workplace, there's a difference between professional acclimation versus this expectation of assimilation. And I think that when individuals are coming from a variety of diverse backgrounds, it's important to acknowledge that. I think everyone should acclimate to the level of professional decorum, right? But I think that sometimes I'm a non-traditional student, so I want to plug that. But I think sometimes for the younger students, they may struggle in regards to losing their own identity in order to fit in, and just the sensitivity around that. So I think that as students get more experience, they build or establish their own sense of agency. Now, when they're a novice, the bottom line is they have to earn their stripes, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't be themselves, but as they get more experience, for lack of a better word, credibility, they can step into these atmosphere with a stronger sense of self. So that I think is important. But I definitely think that you answered my question, so I want to answer that as well.
Okay. I think it's a great point that you bring up because I see this happen sometimes with a job search. So I'll give an example. I've had a student, and this is not unique to this student, this could happen, that found when they straightened their hair, they got more responses on LinkedIn than when they left their hair curly, right? So there are things that you may think you have to do to fit into a space. The nice thing about internships is you're almost trying that workplace before you work there, right? So pay attention to those things, pay attention to the interview process, pay attention to every part of the process as you join that space, because it will come up and you will see those things pop up that you're like, I don't feel like I can be myself. And there are going to be some points in your career, especially early in your career, that you may say, I just want to stack my money. I just want to make money. I don't care if I have to straighten my hair. I don't care if I have to do this thing. I'm going to be making this amount of money. And it's okay to say that. But eventually, as you start to work, you're going to find that you do want a space that you can be yourself and feel like yourself. And some of this also can be mitigated through mentorship and support. Some ways to navigate it as well is if it is about your identity, finding someone that you feel like shares that identity that you can talk to at that company. So right now, you're a student, you can be curious, you can reach out to any professional in any industry, and you can have those conversations as many times as you need to kind of understand, one, what do those norms look like in my industry? But then specifically, what does this look like at the actual company? So there are going to be times earlier in your career that I feel like you may need to compromise a little bit and learn the land, build a skill set, because your skill set is really what's going to allow you to navigate and then eventually find the place where you could be your authentic self. But if you feel like you don't have the skills and you can't be yourself, it makes it even harder. So just keep that in mind, that it takes time to build those skill sets to say, I don't really like it here and I'm going to leave, right? But if you don't have those things, you're going to feel stuck, not being yourself and then not having all of the tools. So that's just my thought on kind of navigating that, and whether you want to stay to be in that place that you feel like you can't quite be yourself. All right. So the last thing that I want to cover is professionalism beyond the workplace. So your social media presence. Right now, LinkedIn is probably the top way for you to connect with people professionally without them seeing pictures of you on the beach or pictures of you with your friends, right? So just make sure that you're using that to the best of your ability, and that is at the forefront of your job search or your internship search. And the way you want to do that is just by adding the content that needs to be there and connecting with people primarily on LinkedIn, so that they get to see the things that you're doing. Is it okay to have other social platforms? Absolutely. But I would say to lock them down, right? I'm not going to tell you don't watch Ratchet TV. I'm not going to tell you to not do these things that you're like, this is really funny, right? But if you're going to do that, if you're going to comment on things, just know that those messages don't go away, and that people are looking you up and that they're going to search for you, right? Particularly, I have students who are like, I'm interested in social media. And I'm like, okay, so do you use your platform to kind of show your brand and show who you are? And they're like, no, not really. I just use it to connect, with my friends, or if I'm looking at something funny. So just knowing that where you're spending your time is super important, and the messages that you want to show there are super important. So if you have inappropriate things, just keep it private. I'm not telling you to stop doing those things, but people are going to look. And if you don't have a LinkedIn profile right now, create one. The nice thing about that is when you create it, it'll be top in that Google search. And that's my other tip: Google yourself, see what comes up. Sometimes you may have a common name. I've had this happen. Someone had a really common name and a mugshot for someone else showed up, right? So that's a clear indicator. Go create a LinkedIn profile so that someone knows, like, this is you. Direct them in that way, to see all the things that you're doing. And yeah, that's mainly it. Just know that, like, if you are using that social platform, like Instagram, for example, you can use it professionally to connect with people because people do post jobs there, but just really think about how you're curating yourself and your brand and what messages you want there. And maybe it could be creating two separate accounts, for example. So final takeaways: professionalism is learned. So you're going to learn a lot of this as you start to work. That's why it's super important to get internships and to have these professional conversations. Your interpersonal skills are really going to shape your reputation, whether someone wants to hire you, whether someone wants to promote you or keep you around or work with you, right? And your small choices make a really big difference. So sometimes, especially now, if you are searching for an internship or looking for a job, it may feel really daunting, but just know, if you're doing all of these little things, right? If you're connecting with people, if you're attending events like this, all of these small choices are really going to help you get closer to the things that you're looking for. And that is all that I have.
Thank you so much, Vincia. So I'm going to stop the recording.